Do you want to create realistic materials and build a visual narrative in your renders? I'll show you the complete workflow using PBR materials, True Displacement, and color configuration for your renders. To start building the scene, we'll import the project model. In this case, we'll be using the Olive Grove House project by Balzar Architects. As the name suggests, the project is located in an olive field, so we'll begin by creating a path of nature to recreate the olive plantation. We'll adjust its position so it aligns perfectly with the house, and then modify the number of trees and their scale so the composition feels more controlled and allows us to see through them. In the Properties panel, we'll set Random Rotation to 1 to avoid visible repetition. To increase realism, we'll also slightly increase Random Offset and Random Spacing, since in real life, trees would never grow in perfectly aligned rows. Now that the path of nature is ready, we'll duplicate it to create a grid of olive trees. However, we don't want every row to look identical, so we'll change the random seed parameter for each row to avoid any repetitive patterns. These small variations are key to achieving a more realistic render. Next, we'll create a scatter on the background material to add depth to the image. We'll use the same type of olive trees, but we'll also add shrubs to break the horizon line at ground level. By default, the scatter looks overly saturated, so we'll reduce the scale and occurrence probability of the olive trees and increase the probability of shrubs, allowing more low vegetation than tall elements. We'll also change the distribution pattern to make it more dispersed and slightly increase the density. However, when switching to a pedestrian view, you'll notice the scatter still reads as a solid wall of trees, so to increase depth, we need to create more empty spaces between them. To do this, in random scaling, make sure to lock the proportions and set a scale range between 20% and 80%. In the lower parameter, we'll also set random scaling to 1 to accentuate these differences. Once we can see through the trees, the image gains more depth. Now we'll define the scene. We'll set the focal length to 35 millimeters and enable the grid to place the camera along the central axis. Since we want to see more of the landscape and the sky, we'll slightly lower the trees and reduce their density. With the scene defined, we'll add hills in the background. Let's activate Terrain and choose one of D5's preset terrain models. We'll use 3 hills at different distances, adjusting their scale and height so they appear in the image without completely blocking the sky. The goal here is to create multiple depth layers within the scene. Even though the ground surface is irregular, the trees still appear to grow out of nowhere. To fix this, we'll add a small soil base to each tree. Let's duplicate the path of nature and replace the olive trees with a small stone mound. And then move it to the olive tree's base and scale them down a bit. We'll copy this along each tree row and adjust the density so everything aligns correctly. We'll also tweak the random offset so the bases align better. And just like with the olive trees, we'll change the seed value for each row to avoid repetition. The ground still feels a bit too clean, so we'll add another scatter to the ground material and use a leaf asset. This helps suggest that all the natural elements are interacting with each other. Once again, we'll adjust the distribution pattern to make it more dispersed and slightly increase the density. We'll fine-tune a few small details on the background hills bringing more life into the scene. For the materials, let's start by replacing the hill material with something more desaturated, and we'll increase the peak altitude value to avoid any snowy appearance. Now we can start with the PBR materials, which provides a much more realistic result. For the interior floor, we'll use a terracotta-colored concrete tiles. I found the perfect one on sharetextures.com, a great website offering hundreds of free assets. We'll go to the concrete category and download Concrete Tile 1, preferably in high resolution. Back in D5, we'll import the texture maps for the floor material. The base color map uses the main texture, also known as the albedo or diffuse map. We'll continue importing each map according to its name, and we'll set the material type to displacement to use the new True Displacement feature introduced in D5 version 3.0. Now let's break down what each map does. The normal map adds up some relief to the texture. When you set it at 0, the surface appears completely flat. At -1, the relief is inverted, and at 1, the surface gains a strong 3D character, clearly defining the tiles and their gaps. The specular map controls reflectivity. The higher the value, the more reflective the material becomes. However, this always works hand in hand with roughness. If roughness increases, reflections become more diffused even with high specular values. In this case, we want to emphasize the concrete's texture, so we'll increase roughness. I recommend never setting these values to 0, since materials should always respond to environmental lighting. For the metallic value, you'll notice the map is completely black. If we remove it and increase the value, the material becomes dark and reflective like metal. With the black map enabled, the metallic value has no visible effect, since black indicates zero metallic response. The ambient OCO map, or AO map, enhances shadow definition within the texture, adding depth. On flat tiles like these, the effect is subtle, but on deeper materials, it makes a big difference. Previously, D5 used parallax displacement to fake surface depth. With version 3.0, True Displacement actually rebuilds the geometry, creating real 3D depth. However, this can offset the geometry from its original position, so we'll adjust the vertical offset until it aligns correctly. We'll align the texture towards the center to avoid broken tiles. Then, we'll copy this material to the pool edge so you can better see how True Displacement works. When disabled, the edges look perfectly smooth, something impossible in real life. Once enabled, physical breaks and imperfections appear, making the material far more realistic. But be mindful of how this affects surrounding geometry. D5 offers a maintain continuity option to address displacement seams. Most of the time, it works great, creating continuous geometry with realistic imperfections. However, in this project, it creates some weird geometry, so we'll keep it disabled. We'll apply the same material to the terrace and return to our main view and align the textures towards the center of the image. For the pool, the idea is for the water to act as a mirror reflecting the landscape. We'll set the color to black so it doesn't affect reflections, and reduce the normal values to make the water appear still. For the soil, we'll use another custom PBR material, this time from Polyhaven, which offers incredible quality free assets. Under the terrain category, we'll select this material. Not all maps are always included, so you can expand the options menu and download the maps in the format you need. Back in D5, we'll import all the texture maps. Here, the normal map clearly adds a lot of realism. And you can see how specular and roughness maps interact. With roughness at 0, the surface looks even wet due to strong reflections, like if there was water there. But when you increase the roughness and lower the specular, this effect is removed, making the dirt look more dry. Next, we'll import the ambient Oko map. Here you can see how it noticeably enhances shadow depth. We'll make this a displacement material type and import its map. The difference with True Displacement here is amazing. The terrain becomes much more irregular and realistic. Be cautious with the subdivision level, as it controls how many times the geometry is subdivided. High values can make the file extremely heavy. If you see a warning message, lower the value, the result will still look great. We'll adjust the vertical offset until the leaf scatter becomes visible. And then we recalculate the scatter to avoid floating leaves. Now we'll shift the soil color towards a reddish tone. Don't worry too much about it looking a bit exaggerated right now. It'll help unify the image later.
And here is a trick I really like to use. Since the stone bases under the trees feel disconnected from the soil, we'll copy the soil's base color texture into the stone material and match its color values. With the same map values applied, the stones blend naturally into the ground. We can adjust the sun position to be able to see how the mound now feels like it's part of the terrain. We'll tweak the leaf colors so they don't stand out too much, and apply the soil material across the rest of the ground. Now we'll adjust the tree's leaf color. In a previous tutorial, I showed you how one option to do this was by changing the material type to a custom alpha material. But this time, we'll keep the foliage material to preserve leaf translucency and instead modify the subsurface color map. This map controls how light passes through the leaves. So by applying the same map used for the soil and matching the color values, the foliage blends much better with the scene. Unfortunately, D5 doesn't allow copying materials directly from its library assets, so we'll repeat this process manually for the background trees and shrubs. Finally, we'll add a few last detail materials from the D5 library, like black matte metal for the rails, and the plastic material for the chair. In environment, we'll use a sunset HDRI to achieve a more horizontal, natural lighting setup. We'll adjust the orientation so the light comes from the center, and then go to the effects panel and reduce bloom. Back in environment, we'll warm up the sky temperature and activate the sun, lowering its intensity and fine-tuning its direction. We'll enable fog, increase its density, and give it a subtle orange tint. Adjusting height and distance helps add depth to the background without affecting the foreground. In camera effects, we'll use a LUT, but built-in LUTs in D5 aren't always ideal, so we'll use a custom one. Color Grading Central offers a free pack of 70 high-quality LUTs. After registering, you'll receive an email where you'll find a download link, and then you just download the LUT pack. In D5, we'll select Customize LUT and choose one from the Film Emulation folder. Notice how it harmonizes the image and gives it a more cinematic look. We'll lower the LUT intensity, disable auto exposure, and increase the exposure manually. For local exposure, I usually keep the values low to soften highlights and shadows. We'll increase contrast, slightly lower shadows, reduce slope to soften highlights, and raise the temperature for a warm atmosphere. We'll introduce a magenta tint to neutralize yellows, increase vignette to guide the viewer's eye toward the landscape, and slightly desaturate the image to achieve an atmospheric, almost a nostalgic feel. With the image nearly complete, we'll add the final details. Let's copy the soil base color texture into the leaf material as well so they blend better. Then we apply a reddish concrete to the roof to catch light reflections, and copy it to the interior wall. Let's create a decals layer and add some water stains around the pool to suggest someone has been there recently. This will help a lot to build a narrative beyond just showing a static image, but creating a story behind the render. We'll switch the chair material to something smoother and more reflective. Adjust the tree's placement to open up the landscape and allow more natural light in. And finally, we're ready to render. This is the final result. Materials, light, and color working together to build a visual narrative in the scene. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.